Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. My name is Justin Sackety. I work at YouTube and I'm here on behalf of Google's Diversity and Inclusion team. We're proud to support our veterans at Google and across the country. We're particularly excited about supporting Ms. Soledad O'Brien's efforts to have this very important conversation live with Google Hangouts on air. You can join the ongoing conversation about the power of web and technology and its ability to move our communities forward by connecting with us on Google+ at Accelerate with Google. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Soldedad O'Brien, who needs no introduction.
Thank you, Dustin. I appreciate that. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the conversation. We're doing a Google Hangout around a documentary that I have just completed. It's called The War Comes Home, and today we have a great opportunity to talk to some of the veterans who will be appearing in this documentary that will air on Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on CNN. So I'll start by introducing them, and during our conversation we'll run some clips so you can get a sense of what the doc is about. Jay Clark is a retired veteran, and he worked at the Los Angeles Police Department, in the Secret Service, at the FBI, all that before he decided to found Save a Warrior in the spring, right, of 2012. We'll talk a little bit more about that organization and the documentary that we did around that organization. And Delon Beckett is next to him. Delon is one of the veterans that we focus on in this doc. He served at Camp Anaconda between 2010 and 2011. He is one of the subjects of the doc. It's nice to see you guys.
Good to see you.
So Delon, I'm going to start with you because this documentary is a very personal story about your life. A couple of days before you decided to go to Save a Warrior, a 5.5-day long program that Jake will describe a little bit more for us in just a moment, your life was in quite a bit of a shambles. I'm going to show our very first clip, which I think sets it up a little bit, and then on the other side I want to ask you about what that time was like. Delon Beckett served at Camp Anaconda, Iraq in 2010. He was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress in 2011. Doctors at the Veterans Administration have given him anti-anxiety medications, antidepressants, sleep aids, and a drug that's supposed to block bad dreams.
The alcohol helps suppress my feelings. I was having a lot of suicidal ideation. I was having a lot of homicidal ideation too. And it was getting really scary. I was afraid of what I was going to do.
It's estimated that 1 in 5 veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars suffer from post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, or depression.
No more. Done.
Veterans are killing themselves at an alarming rate, and post-traumatic stress is a significant predictor of suicide by all vets. An estimated 22 veterans commit suicide each day, almost 8,000 a year. So you gave our photographers, Andrew and Rick, incredible access to your life. And a lot of people have asked why. Why were you so open and why were you so honest at a time when a lot was spiraling out of control in your life?
Well, at that point, it kind of ended up being, well, I'm at the end of the rope anyways, you know. And they were willing to ask, which, you know, most of the time when nobody really asks because, you know, you put up that wall and you have on that mask, so nobody really, they either think that everything's going really well for you in your life or they think you look really angry and unapproachable. But, you know, they were really nice people and we related really well, so it was just kind of a natural thing to be like, hey, well, you know, make it a little bit easier. You guys can just stay here, do your thing and whatnot. And
they shot you the couple of days before you were, as you were heading off.
Yeah.
To Save a Warrior. How had you heard about that program?
Well, one of my buddies in my platoon had got killed by a police officer, and that kind of brought the morale down in our unit again. You know, we had a pretty bad history of bad leadership and whatnot. And when that had happened, they brought a mental health specialist down to come talk to all of us, and you know, I went and talked to him personally and told him what I was experiencing. And that was one of the first times I admitted to everybody in my platoon about how I actually felt, you know, and how since I came back. And he told me about this program that he was going to called Save a Warrior, and that there was one going on March 2nd, and that if I was, he gave me the website, told me to check it out, and if I was interested, to try to get me into the one in March.
So Save a Warrior, I mentioned that you decided to found that in 2012. What was the process that led up to creating this program, which has a very specific sort of roadmap of how that 5.5 days goes?
That was kind of a collision of about 5 or 6 different things going on in my life at the same time. But what kind of really was, the threshold for beginning that conversation was, I'd lost my job. I'd been suicidal for a long time. I was struggling in recovery. I couldn't make sense of a lot of things. I had a lot of really good things going on in my life. And at the same time, these parallel issues were happening where I was looking at the returning warrior suicides. I had a high school friend who had a young son who had been in Afghanistan, and he was really struggling. And I felt like that there was a lot of effort being put into returning warrior issues, but nobody was really cracking this one. And I've always liked to take on big things. And I thought, I wonder if you could solve this issue. I wonder if you could back somebody out of this conversation they have with themselves about taking their own life. And I was, in an odd way, I was kind of fascinated to see if that problem could be solved. And I had a lot of time on my hands. I was going to school, and I sat down with a tablet one night, and I just started penciling out this idea that I had from a bunch of different encounter and adventure therapies and recovery programs that I'd looked at. And I thought about this young warrior who was the son of this high school classmate, and I made it about him. I said, if I was him, if I was 21 years old, and I'd had the kind of combat tour that he had had, what would I want to have? What would I like to be exposed to get on with the rest of my life? And it came out to a 5.5 day look based on the time it would take to teach somebody a solid meditation technique and some other experiential modeling therapies that I had gone through myself. And that's how Save a Warrior came to be.
When I first met the group during cohort 010, which happened in March, I think Delon was probably the most overt to an outsider about being suicidal, not just because we had been following him, but I think he was just very clear, like, if this thing doesn't work, I'm out. I want to play a clip where you talk a little bit about your suicidal thoughts, and then I'll ask you a question on the other side. Let's play that clip.
I was having a lot of suicidal ideation. I was having a lot of homicidal ideation too, and it was getting really scary. Kids just sitting there, they're not doing anything, not bothering you. You see an object and you start, for instance, I used to see, a hammer, and all of a sudden I would just think about picking that hammer and just smashing their brains in. And I was just like sitting there, I'm like, this is getting ridiculous. I was afraid of what I was going to do.
What was that like, to be so done that you were going to seriously think about killing yourselves? You described it as a burning building, and I'd love for you to use that metaphor, because I think for those of us on the outside, it was one of the first times that I kind of got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I have read that quote from a guy when I was sitting there trying to understand, these suicidal thoughts, and to sum it all up, it's just like being trapped in a burning building. And you have the flames in the window, and the only way to escape the flames is to jump out the window. And you don't necessarily want to die, but you don't want to burn. And I got tired of burning. Every morning wake up and it physically hurts just to get out of bed, to get yourself to get up and get in your car and go to work, and you're just miserable. So you put on that mask because you don't want anybody asking you about what's going on. You kind of want everybody to leave you alone, but at the same time you kind of wish somebody would talk to you a little bit. But so you go through, you hold that mask all day, and then you come home and you take that mask off and you hold in all those emotions and you just unleash it on your family. And eventually it wears you down. You become a prisoner of your own mind, and it just becomes more than just having a desire to live. It just seems you think about, well, if I tried this, if I tried that, but you become so negative and so trapped within yourself that none of those things even seem possible. You're at the bottom, but you keep digging as a solution to get out. But by the time you realize you're so far down and that you've dug yourself in this big hole, it's just impossible. It seems impossible to get out.
How many of the guys, not just who are in cohort 010, but all the warriors who've come through Save a Warrior are like Delon, or is he unusual?
No, that's actually, you know, when the guys show up to the cohort, I've already talked to them before they sit in the seat, and it's not a question of them earning the seat. They've already paid for the seat and then some. But it's actually more advantageous to find somebody where, you know, we found Delon found us, because a person gets to a point where I think they're desperate enough to take direction, and they're like, okay, I'll give this one last shot. And most of the guys and a lot of the women, you know, that have been through the project have admitted very clearly, you know, that they may speak about it in euphemism, but they'll eventually get comfortable enough in a conversation, usually with myself or someone else, and say, look, yeah, I'm really suicidal. Like, they've tried so many different things, you know. They've tried the medication, the self-medicating with booze and maybe marijuana, cognitive behavioral therapy. It just hasn't disrupted, you know, this vector assigned course that they're on, where they really believe that it's not going to end well. So the vast majority of the people that have come to Save a Warrior are suicidal.
What's the thing that works?
And prior attempts. You know,
have literally
many prior attempts: cutting, attempted hangings, attempted suicide by cop, crashing cars, getting prepared to jump off a building. You know, a suicide that was interrupted at the last moment is one of the testimonials that comes to mind.
You have a very aggressive program, because we kind of were running with, you know, the whole time, trying to keep up with what you guys were doing. What is the thing, do you think, that works? Is it the transcendental meditation? Is it that Delon was in a place where he could not drink because you don't have alcohol? Is it the bonding of men? What is it?
I believe it's a combination of the things. When you look at enough who've gone through, you know, you look to cut the ends of the extremes off, and what's the through line here? And I think it really comes down to a renewed sense of purpose and a renewed sense of belonging in a shared community, using some time-tested skills. And as soon as this population, which unfortunately gets lumped into other protected classes for a lot of the wrong reasons, as soon as they know that there is a purpose greater than themselves, that someone else could be suffering, it really disrupts the overriding thoughts of suicide. And like, the sense of purpose is immediate, and it really creates an other dimensional type experience for that person that they haven't felt in a long time, maybe since they've been deployed, maybe since they've been in a unit where they really feel that they had fit in there. And the sense of community of a shared experience is very, very powerful. And there are certain agreements that occur in our conversation: unconditional positive regard, no judgment, no criticism. That doesn't always get distinguished in military environments where there's a lot of cutting humor, but we ask that we not do that there. So there's it's kind of a love mafia, for lack of a better term. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that is kind of an odd term.
It's a love mafia that's formed. But there's an amazing community where these guys and girls talk across cohorts and talk across different you know, groups that have gone through, and the affinity is immediate. The way they are with each other, they're so good with each other, and so supportive of one another's victories, and that's infectious.
What worked for you, Delon? What was the thing?
It was a combination. Just like Jake was saying, it wasn't just one thing. It was understanding your pre-trauma. It was
for people who don't know what that means, what is that? So
pre-trauma is basically, what you experienced during your childhood. Those subconscious things that you think didn't really bother you that bad, or it wasn't really that bad, but have been tearing you apart, on the inside. And understanding those things and how those played into my current situation, made it worse. And the meditation, that's what keeps me sober. Meditate. I remember that's the first time when I came out, when I learned my mantra, was when the first time I genuinely smiled, and I couldn't stop it. It just came over my face, and I couldn't stop smiling. And it was, meeting all these great guys, and being able to have that non-judgment, and just all having that shared experience together. I mean, it was only 5.5 days, but it was like I've known these guys my whole life.
Garrett Combs is another one of the veterans that we profile, and when he told me about how he decided to sign up, I mean, honestly, I got to tell you, I'm not in the military. I don't have family members who are in the American military. My dad's Australian and served in the Australian military. I was really surprised at his description of sort of how it was sold to him. Let's play that for everybody, and then I'm going to ask you about that, Jake.
I walked into the recruiter's office wanting to be a combat photographer. They showed me some cool Ranger videos, and they showed me some cool infantry videos, and they were like, hey man, you can leave in 2 weeks or however it was, like a month, if you enlist in the infantry. And then I was like, all right, cool, sign me up. That looks fun.
So for people who don't know, the infantry is, I guess, what we call the tip of the spear, right? Those are the guys who are doing that really on the ground fighting. And he's kind of laughing as he's describing one of the most difficult, arduous, horrible, I think in some ways, maybe challenging jobs in the military. Is that really how it works?
Well, you know, tragedy plus time equals comedy. So he can look back and laugh now as a man with a fully formed central nervous system who realizes that at 17 or 18 that we make impulsive decisions. There's a reason why we recruit young Americans at that age. And you know, I enlisted at 17, and you never get what you go in thinking you're going to get. But that doesn't mean you can't have a wonderful experience in the military. But yeah, for someone deciding to go from being a combat photographer with an artistic background like Garrett and then becoming like a fully fledged warrior, the great thing about that is he still has the artist's ability to express what that experience was like, same as Oliver Stone, same as Carl Marlantes. So his generation is incredibly fortunate that he's back, that he's in good repair, and that he can tell stories, whether it's through a visual medium or the way he can express himself as an artist.
He describes himself during our interviews as being very angry. And he actually told it so beautifully. He said, you know, I knew that I had a temper problem because there were holes all over my walls. You know, I knew that he would swerve at people on the road, that he was just angry all the time. And he had this little baby, a 1-year-old, and he was genuinely nervous about scaring the crap out of a kid who was just now, you know, getting old enough to maybe to learn to be afraid of his dad. How many of the guys that you see, and women, have that issue? He never talked about being suicidal. He just talked about being really angry.
Well, anger, as we distinguish for them in the project, maybe for the first time they ever hear it, is fear and sadness. And you know, just to clarify, like, we don't sit around and talk about their feelings. They uncover, discover, and discard very quickly the pre-trauma that Delon talked about. But one of the overarching things that we get them down to is anger, and it's comprised of fear and sadness. And the fear is, I'm not enough. There's not enough. I'm not going to get what I want. I'm going to lose what I have. So that's anxiety. The sadness is what feeds the depression over regret. I should have done this. I should have done that. So when you're able to uncollapse that and unpack that for them, they know that, okay, I understand what this emotion really is for me. And now I have access to skills that allow me to further access my own internal adaptive mechanism and begin to heal myself through good self-care and through paying it forward. So it's really important that you bring that up, because we get to that very quickly in the first morning.
He mentioned to me that it was the classes in learning how the brain operates, classes that he fully admits that, you know, he could have just taken online, right? He could have Googled, you know, how does the brain with post-traumatic stress work, and seen very similar data. But he said being sort of taught, like, this is what is happening in your brain, was kind of an aha moment for him, I guess.
Everyone takes away something differently from the project. I mean, when you hit an issue like PTS from 9 or 10 different angles, you have enough of a buffet there for someone to have that space, to have that aha moment. And when you have a teacher like a Dr. Michael Salonius who begins talking about neuroscience and neurophysiology, the skeptical warriors like Garrett, who admits he was very skeptical, he's listening to somebody who comes from an evidence-based background and is distinguishing for him what's going on neurophysiologically in an environment that he enjoys, a classroom environment like that. That's a breakthrough, and that's a moment for him to do it in an affinity group and to bounce that off of people in the room, and he sees them warming up to that conversation. So it's the right set and setting, the right dosing and sequence, and the right titration.
Garrett talked about an event in combat where his life, I mean, it sounds like hyperbole, but his life sort of changed in a moment, if you will. And let's play that.
I landed over there.
It was kind of a mass casualty situation for us.
Sam's coming after us.
Our squad leader was the one who took the RPG, basically, square in the chest. My friends were like just walking past me, dazed. And when we did the head count, we realized that we were missing one person. And it was really it broke my faith, man. It broke my faith in something good coming of what we were doing.
Can warriors get stronger after having post-traumatic stress? There's a lot of conversations, and you and I have talked about this a bit, about, veterans as victims, and can they in fact go through post-traumatic stress and come out stronger?
Well, just to go back to the clip you just showed, if you see when you freeze him in that moment, there's the body has this parasympathetic emotional response, and he rubs himself, and he does the flicks dust, anything he can to stop an emotion that is trying to come out, through tears, right? So he's trying to, all right, let me just gather myself, and he's having, a moment like that in the project is a threshold experience where he's actually able to go through that and be in a safe environment to have that, so he doesn't have to keep swallowing that potential breakthrough. But I think we've left people in a situation from the feedback we've gotten where they have such a powerful breakthrough and such powerful threshold experiences, moments that we call over which they'll never get, that it completely reframes the way that life begins to occur for them. So after the project, they begin to look at life through a lens that was previously not available to them because they didn't know. Something got distinguished for them and something got subtracted, some false belief that they were carrying around about themselves. Like if I share this, if I share that I was sexually abused and traumatized as a child, everybody in this room is going to get up and leave, and I'm going to be on my own, and everything I believe about myself being bad and being shameful is going to be validated. And when that doesn't happen, and when people say, hey, that happened to me too, I'm really sorry you went through that, it completely transforms that person emotionally in that moment forever. And that's what's available in these kinds of conversations. There's a reason this conversation works, because it's the right thing at the right time for the right reason.
You have shepherds in Save a Warrior, and one shepherd who took part in the 10th cohort was Bobby Farmer. Mm-hmm. Highly decorated. I mean, we spent a paragraph in the documentary just talking about sort of all the amazing things that he had done as a special forces guy who had served, I think, 10 tours of duty. Correct. I want to play a little bit of Bobby Farmer addressing Cohort 010, and then we'll talk about guys like Bobby Farmer who are shepherds for your organization.
I pulled out my Glock 19 out of my locker, sit down at my desk, made sure it was loaded, stuck it in my mouth, was going to pull the trigger. The next thing that crossed through my mind was my kids, my two sons. At that point, I was like, I don't want some other raising my kids. I put my gun down, and I called the VA suicide hotline. And that is where I can tell you a 40-minute wait on hold with a Glock pistol sitting on my desk. It's funny, isn't it? Glock pistol sitting on my desk and I'm on hold.
Bobby Farmer, I know, isn't with Save a Warrior anymore, but guys like Bobby Farmer, how critical are they to the success of your project?
Well, I mean, I think there is a future with Bobby Farmer and Save a Warrior. We've communicated recently, but Bobby has a family that he's looking to raise, and he's been away for a long time. But having someone like that and some of the other shepherds, but Bobby in particular, male warriors in particular respect other male warriors that beat them in fair competition. And when you look at a warrior like Bobby Farmer, who was, a no BS Green Beret, Special Forces, 10 rotations, and who has an intuitive ability to be in that room and is so humble and so gracious and shares with these guys, listen, you know, don't put me on a plateau. When I go home, I'm going to mow my lawn, just like you. But he also has gone through his own struggle and his own suffering and come out the other side of that with some amazing tools. And his background as a warrior, as a Green Beret, is as a warrior statesman. So he is specifically trained and selected to be trained in a way to go in and pay it forward and come from a place of benevolence. His job as a Special Forces operator is to teach oppressed people how to free themselves from persecution. So he walks in that as a warrior, and he comes back to a place like Save a Warrior. You hand Bobby a training schedule, a debit card, and an envelope full of cash. He can take those warriors all the way through 5.5 days and prep them to be with provider. He's a project director. And it is knowing that there are warriors like that back in America who have the experience of Bobby Farmer that tells us that we can solve the suicide issue. Because if you had 10 more warriors like Bobby spread out across the country running projects, you would knock the tarnation out of the suicide issue. You can't teach that.
Garrett said that that moment was really important for him. What was that like for you? I mean, explain to me the importance of guys like Bobby Farmer. I know the entire project, you were surrounded by these shepherds who had experience and were there kind of watching your backs and guiding you. What, was that important to you?
Yeah, you know, some of us had our reservations about expressing how we really felt, and listening to Bobby tell his story, and it basically gave us permission. Like, it's okay to feel the way that you feel. You don't have to hold that back. And that was sort of like, you know, you throw up the green flag, you know, here's the tissues or whatever, you know, you can let this stuff out. You don't have to hold it in anymore, you know. And you know, other shepherds like Dan Logan, you know, when I was going through withdrawals, he was right there, you know, helping me out through that. And the other shepherds, you know, Jimmy Connors and whatnot, always there, you know, he's always upbeat and, you know, making jokes and stuff and making you laugh, but he's, you know, always really intent and listening and caring. And just, you know, he's like, hey, you guys need anything? You need anything? So, you know, the only thing that you really needed to focus on was healing. You didn't have to worry about anything else.
We had a shot, and I don't think we ended up putting it in the doc, of Dan Logan handing you maybe a Bible or a book.
Yeah, it was Alcoholics Anonymous book. It was his, and that it was his gift to me. He gave it to me to read while I was there, and before we left, he had ended up giving that to me.
He said, you might find something in this, or you might want to use it as a doorstop if you don't find something in it. But clearly, I mean, was that useful to you?
Yeah, I read it every night. You know, every night before we would go to bed. You know, and we'd talk and whatnot, and about our experiences. And you know, and he basically said, you know, it's going to get easier. You know, and gave me that encouragement that, you know, just because you're going through these withdrawals doesn't mean like it's going to end. It's going to get easier. And that helped me out a lot.
How important are guys like Dan Logan and the Bobby Farmers and the list of shepherds who kind of watch around each cohort? I think you finished your 11th cohort or your 12th course. Your 13th will be your next.
They're essential. And, you know, the fact that DeLon remembers them by name, typically the only people you always remember by name in the military are drill sergeants, your drill instructors. You never forget them. But that they recognize and identify and they know their names, they make such an impression. And we have guys and girls lining up. When's the next cohort? They want a shepherd, and they do it on their own time and on their own dime. And Jimmy has come back 3 cohorts in a row from New Jersey, paid his own airfare, you know, has gone to great expense. And if you ask, you know, why do you come back? He goes, I just get so much more out of it. And again, it's that sense of purpose. And some of these shepherds, you know, with a little bit more time, they could do what Bobby act as project directors, you know, Brian, and, you know, I try to keep it on their first name, but, you know, there's guys in this community and girls in this community, they are so exceptional and competent, and they get it, that it's like, you know, watching kids do double dutch on the street. It's like they're just waiting for the rhythm, and then they want to jump in, and you can just shepherd them, paying this forward. And that's why I'm very hopeful that, you know, we can make a big dent in this issue because of our whole theme of paying it forward, because you can't just do this 12 at a time. These folks will have to, and that's why we changed the curriculum, they have to be able to go back out into their communities, grab guys and girls in groups of 10 and 12 and have meditation groups and begin looking for service opportunities across America.
We have a question from Robert Marks. He says, Soledad, how did you first find out about Save a Warrior? We were introduced over a breakfast, and you said you invited me to come out and watch, I guess, cohort 005, which us non-civilians would just say 5, but but in the military, 005.
But you know why we do that?
Why?
Because it's a 3-digit number, and if we ever got to 990 cohorts, we would have put 999 cohorts. We would have put 10,000 people through the project. So for us, it's hope. Like, we do it with the 3 numbers so that people, and it's a way for them to relate. So if Delon runs into somebody across the country and he says, yeah, I did the project, what cohort were you in? He's going to say 010, they're going to say 007, and it's a way of identifying time and space for them. That's important in this community to do that. So anyway, we met over breakfast.
When I came out we met over breakfast, and then you invited me to come out to California and sit in on the 5th cohort, which I did. And then we started sort of negotiating, coming in and actually doing a shoot and work with some amazing folks at MediaStorm who did, I thought, a terrific job. Tell me a little bit about your concerns about a crew coming in and telling a very personal story. I mean, in a way, you're responsible for a bunch of guys, not only their physical well-being, but their emotional well-being. They're a bunch of very fragile people. A lot of people would say, why would you bring a crew in for that?
A lot of people have asked me why I brought a crew in for that. I asked myself that. But no, seriously, I knew that this was a generation that the media went to war with, or they went to war with the media. There was a lot of embedded journalism, Sebastian Junger and some other bigger names, Anderson Cooper, and I had reached out to some people and asked them, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. But it also had a lot to do with you. I had a lot of requests for people to come in and shoot documentaries, but I was familiar with your work. I was a big fan of what you had done over the years.
Feel free to take a lot of time.
Yes, I will relish and acknowledge. But
I appreciate that.
But I knew you would get it. I knew you would take a thoughtful approach.
Did any of the guys say, "Listen, I'm out. I'm not coming if there's going to be cameras"?
No, because when we invite, we have a very specific process that we follow when we send out an invitation letter. For your production, we just backed it out a few weeks longer and said, "This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it, and we're looking for people that are interested. Please, we suspect that they will focus primarily on a few warriors, but this is what's going to be going on." We only had one warrior who was in a very, kind of surgical special operations position that wouldn't do it. But other than that, everybody else was like, I'm willing, and most of them said, I'm willing to do this if someone else can benefit from my participation.
What's been the biggest change since the one that I got to see, and even cohort number 10, and now you're going to start cohort 13 at some point? What's been the biggest change, and has the funding gotten easier for you? I know you sort of,
No, but the funding,
cohort by cohort.
I've never directly asked the public for money. I've always leaned on the well-to-do, and we've allowed money to come in organically. But I believe that from this documentary, attention is being paid that will allow us to reach out to the appropriate marketers in business development, because what you're doing with this is you're creating some top-of-mind brand awareness for Save a Warrior, and at the same time, we didn't want to lose quality when we do look to go to scale. So it's about finding the right relationships for people in the business world that get this.
What's your biggest change? How's the program changed?
I think the biggest change is moving toward a meditation technique that warriors can teach directly when they leave the project, because they're already doing it.
Did people ask you for that, Delon? I saw you sort of smiled and laughed. Really? Tell me why. What do you mean?
Well, because
you're the guy who loved TM.
Yeah, well, it's because, I got a lot of friends that are vets too, and it's just, you want to help those that are still that are having issues still, and that TM can give somebody that space, to help them give that buffer. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to teach this guy to do TM. The best I can do is give him my mantra breathe. Then you're a little afraid because you don't want to teach him to do it wrong. Something, you don't want to feel like that. So the fact that they're changing so you can learn and go out and teach is, to me, is so amazing, because then you can go and teach your friends. You can give them that opportunity to regroup before, if they need to go, that they have a chance to hold themselves together.
Can you teach regular people to teach TM? I mean, TM is a whole process. It takes 4 days. I learned TM. It's a real system. I mean, when you guys are taught TM, there's trained TM teachers. Do you move away from TM?
We will move away from TM, but when you have like a master meditation instructor teaching, training the trainers like Michael Salonius, we're very confident, because warriors from the day they enter the military, are taught to train other people. We teach one another. It's like the medical model, you know, train the trainer. But more importantly, we're moving into the 5 pillars of the servant leadership of service, study, contribution, acknowledgement, and prayer and or affirmation to complement the meditation technique. So when warriors come through Save a Warrior, the real takeaway will be them having access to a spiritual initiation process that continues, and for them to kind of have a context that allows for them to say, listen, our purpose is to inspire servant leadership in this country. We need to define those pillars, what they are, what they represent, and what that looks like in someone's life day to day. And, you know, the first 2 years, I think we've really gotten to a place where, you know, not losing anybody to suicide, having the kind of retention in the community that we have, and having the ability to tell this story on these platforms. We have to have something when the clinicians and the institutions say, Jake, how do we replicate that? How do we scale that? What's the backbone on that? How do we study that?
Can it still work? I mean, a lot of the studies that have been done on meditation have been on TM.
It'll work better because when you talk to our guys, most of them are not regular meditators, but they are regularly paying it forward. They're always talking to other people about coming to the project. I can see guys having their own meditation groups in their homes in places like Iowa and Alabama.
Nodding his head, yeah. You see that happening?
Yeah,
yourself? Huh,
very easily.
And teach it off
so
one
what
page.
other ways are you going to change it? Or?
Well, I think we're going to change it in the sense that we're going to further empower warriors to get out there and not feel like that they're doing something wrong by looking to kind of expose the secret sauce. We want to make the curriculum and what we do as open source and transparent as possible. And we would say, look, if you're going to do this, other organizations have approached us. We would like you to follow a method. You know, we think it needs this ingredient and this ingredient and this ingredient, and feel free to do what you want as adjuncts to it. But there's a reason why this works. And again, it comes down to context, the set and setting, the dosing and the sequence. I mean, you have clinicians that have given input with a lot of experience, with a lot of education, and structuring the training where it is. And in 5.5 days, people come out, and you see it in your documentary. DeLon's not the same guy.
Did they save your life? Going to Save a Warrior save your life, do you think?
Yeah. I wouldn't be alive today if I didn't go to Save a Warrior.
Really? It's been 5 months since you
It's been 5 months, and I probably wouldn't have lasted 2 weeks if I didn't go.
Oh. Well, I'm glad you're here.
Me
it was
too.
a real pleasure.
I mean, it's pretty powerful. I mean,
it's a real pleasure to have you as a subject of the documentary.
Thank you.
It was just, you're phenomenal, and you're very, very open. And as a journalist, I don't think you can ask for anything better. We certainly appreciate the access because I think it was really a kind of an amazing 5.5 days just as outsiders taking a look in.
It was an honor having you, and you were very thoughtful about the way you did it from beginning to end, and we're incredibly grateful for what you've done.
That. Well, I look
Made
forward
it
to
completely painless.
I'll tell Andrew and Rick that it was completely painless.
The crew. I think if we have time, just to mention, the crew was so moved by what they saw on the second day, they asked us if they could learn to meditate with us because it was so emotionally taxing for them, and they were wonderful.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah, they absolutely were.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I appreciate you guys chatting with us. I want to remind everybody that you can watch this documentary. It's called The War Comes Home. It's going to air on CNN at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on August 12th. That's on Tuesday. So we hope that you'll take a look and have an opportunity. Afterwards, I'll be tweeting live. And are you on Twitter?
I am.
Are you on Twitter?
Yeah.
Okay, then they'll be tweeting too. They don't know it, but I just have decided that I'll be adding them in everything. So they'll be tweeting as well, because people can ask questions as the story is unfolding. It's a pretty riveting story, so I hope you'll enjoy it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it very much. You bet. Always nice to see you.
Thank you.